Typhoon Ewiniar's strong winds continue in Luzon, Philippines, and we also still have Cyclone Remal. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for May 27th. Ewiniar peaked last night as a Category 2, is now weakened a little bit and is still a Category 1 typhoon. Remal is weakening substantially now that it's inland, but it still looks good on satellite, and an extremely large system producing lots of rainfall over India and Bangladesh. It's just 5 days until the Atlantic hurricane season begins, and there's no areas of interest at this time. There's still a few little storms moving across the United States at the moment. There's a slight risk in effect across the eastern seaboard. Tropics though, quiet, and it's a similar story in the eastern Pacific on day 13 of hurricane season. Just a few little blow-ups there in the deep tropics, but nothing organised and nothing expected in the next 7 days. A little bit of cloud cover west of the Hawaiian Islands as well there. In the western Pacific, Typhoon Ewiniar is starting to push a little bit further away from the Philippines now, but there are still expected to be strong winds across the coast. Signal 1 warnings in effect for the Philippines, and it still holds winds of approximately 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour. And this is Tropical Storm Remal, which is actually only just a tropical storm still. It will be a depression shortly, and then it will continue to weaken and then scoot off quite quickly to the northeast, where it will eventually die off completely. But right now, fairly low pressure in that storm and producing strong winds and very heavy rain over a wide area. Southwest Indian Ocean, we actually have issued a 10% chance for an area of interest there for a potential another tropical cyclone in those same areas, sort of towards the British Indian Ocean territory. Well, this is Typhoon Ewiniar. It is currently 186 kilometers east of Palanan, 199 from Dinapigue, 288 from Santa Ana up north there, 289 from Catanduanes, and 1098 from Okinawa, Japan. It'll be heading northeastwards and could go fairly close to some of those Japanese islands, particularly Daiotojima. So typhoon force winds are well offshore. Tropical storm force winds will still be occurring, even though it is a very tight core of this storm, still possible along the coast. So let's take a look at satellite imagery, first of all, of Tropical Storm Remal. It peaked with winds of about 65 miles per hour before making landfall in West Bengal last night, or early hours of the morning local time. Well, here it is this afternoon, evening, looking still okay with rotation there. Obviously the centre of it's still quite clear. It's not an eye, but it's a clearing near the centre with still decent cloud tops blowing up all across it, but just really shows how large this is. It's probably 2 or 3 times the size of Bangladesh, and the whole country there receiving some kind of impacts from the storm. I imagine there could be some major flooding issues. There's very high populations in this zone, and it's an extremely large system, so lots of precipitation kept within all of that. It could get up to 20 inches, 500 millimeters, and so I would be quite concerned about flooding. So there it is, moving northeastwards right now on that precipitation chart, and there's some radar as well, just showing how that rotation is continuing and still looking pretty decent, and some extremely heavy rain there, possibly on the eastern side more than anything. Well, this is Typhoon Ewiniar, and you can see its movement has pushed a little bit further east in the last few hours. 1 or 2 flare-ups of convection still near the centre, but it has to be said, the ice structure that it did look good for a little while, but it did collapse. So right now we're looking at a weakening storm, but we do expect that it will rebound fairly soon. I don't know where the next eye will come from, or the clear indication. It'll still be down there in the low levels, but in the upper levels it did really fall apart. It mainly due to land interaction, I would expect, but we should see some rebuilding over the next couple of days. We're expecting a second peak also of 100 miles per hour. So still blowing up decent amounts of convection, northern Luzon getting a bit of it as well, but most of the Philippines are just almost in the clear. Still strong winds along the coast, but the heaviest of rainfall is offshore. You'll see that in the radar shortly as well. There's the satellite-derived rainfall. Obviously very high amounts off the coast, and there's some radar imagery. Just caught a brief glimpse there of its core, which looked still really good earlier on in the day. So at those low levels on radar, it's still looking pretty good and a base to build upon as we go forward. Now this is the Atlantic, eastern coast of the United States. We've got this storm front moving through. Of course, it caused serious problems last night. And down in the Caribbean Sea, you can see also those a little disturbance there across Panama. Off the coast of Africa, things still looking quiet, one or two little waves there, but really not too much to talk about. And there is the Eastern Pacific. Again, you can see those little disturbances, really not expected to produce very much there. And this is the Western Pacific, obviously showing the typhoon. It is really small compared to what a normal typhoon would look like, and quite disorganized up towards the north there as well. And there's Remal for comparison, looking extremely large and producing rainfall all across northern and central India, part of its bands there and its influence. So there it is. Sea surface temperatures are still building in the Eastern Pacific, over 30 degrees Celsius, over a large pool there in the main area of development, and those warm waters extending up the Gulf of California. The Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico, pretty much completely sewn up. It's 26 degree isotherm now, and off the coast of Florida getting really warm, near the Bahamas too, over 30 degrees already, and off Cuba towards Jamaica as well. This is the Western Pacific, the Philippine Sea looking good. Once again, really warm temperatures and actually building there east of the Philippine Islands where the typhoon is right now. It's around 31 degrees Celsius, and in the Bay of Bengal still extremely warm even after Cyclone Remal. Granted, it has cooled off a little bit, but still looking at one or two areas of 32 degrees Celsius waters. South China Sea also boiling hot too. Southwest Indian Ocean, could we get another rogue storm? Well, if we did, it will be over warm enough waters in those low latitudes, and they'll be getting even warmer if it moves further west. And this is the Australian region, those temperatures decreasing off there as well, but still a few spots of 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, particularly off the Kimberley. And finally the South Pacific, those temperatures gradually receding, but still looking decent further north over Vanuatu and Fiji, 28 degrees Celsius. Looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies, this is how it looks compared to average. The cool pool in the subtropical Atlantic almost completely erased, and so the whole basin pretty much is well above average, up to 3 or 4 degrees above in some spots. Eastern Pacific, we still have that narrow corridor where the storms usually form, where it's above average. And in the Western Pacific, South China Sea is the hot spot. Bay of Bengal, still a few areas that are well above average, but one or two cool spots after the recent cyclone. This graphic, we don't have an updated version, so it's the same as what we had on our last bulletin, but I doubt it will have changed very much. The Eastern Pacific there, a few spots of high oceanic heat content really blowing up, and in the Western Pacific still a few areas there of very high amounts. I imagine the Ewiniar might have broken that up a little bit more. The Atlantic though, off Jamaica, extremely high values there, lots of energy. This really, the red zones really favour rapid intensification, and that spills into the Gulf of Mexico through the loop current. So let's take a look at the computer models for the next 5 days. This is the GFS, an open and shut case with the Cyclone Remal there moving north-northeast at first and then curving round towards the northeast back into India again later on, currently over central Bangladesh, probably quite close to the capital Dhaka actually, and then it will continue off northeastwards and weaken very quickly once it gets over some of those higher ridges and elevations ahead of it in northern Bangladesh and into India once more. Storm force winds will continue for about 12 to 24 hours. There's Ewiniar, fairly small but moving off northeastwards towards its second peak, probably another category 2 peak, and then it will weaken quite quickly later on. By the time it passes Tokyo, it will be barely a typhoon, if indeed that, and it will be on its way to turning post-tropical. Within that 5-day period as well, we also see one or two little rumblings of maybe one or two new systems. South China Sea, I think people are looking at there for potential development later on, but at the moment too uncertain to mark. Precipitation for both of the storms right now, this is on top of anything that's already occurred over the next 7 days. So you can see Bangladesh and India there getting still very high amounts, mainly further north now ahead of the storm, and that could total nearing 20 inches, 500 millimeters in some areas, 16 there depicted on the chart. For parts of the Philippines, they might get a dousing in the western part of Luzon next week if that system starts to develop. In front of Ewiniar's track, could be 1 or 2 areas getting close to 20 inches, 500 millimeters again, but it's over open water. In the longer range then, we watch to see what happens. Well, there's another storm forming near Taiwan and moving off towards the east, although I'm not sure it gets fully tropical there. I'm not sure on that one at all. And then another system tries to form in the northern Philippines there. It's all a very messy picture with systems trying to form everywhere, it would seem. But at this time, we're not confident on any of those. We haven't given any chances, but nonetheless, it could be a very wet and windy affair across that area. And then look at this little thing once again in the Southwest Indian Ocean. We've given it 10% because all models have a low pressure. Some of them develop it into a tropical cyclone within 7 days, some don't. GFS here does it by the time we get to about the 5th of June, which is beyond the 7-day period. So it could happen, but we're giving it a low chance right now at 10%. Another tiny cyclone there moving westwards, and another one in a low latitude area near the equator. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all our products as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. Are still waiting for Hone t-shirts, still available as well, because we're still waiting for that storm. In the Scilly range then, that looks like a tropical cyclone forming off the Philippines on both sides, one moving northeastwards and then another one getting quite a bit stronger in the South China Sea. Look to the right as well, there's that another system there way out to sea over the Western Pacific, so you could be looking at 4 or 5 systems possibly in the Western Pacific in the next 16 days, but we're really not sure about any of that just yet. But it would be interesting to see if it got off to quite a quick start like that from a standing start that we're currently at. And there it's that stronger cyclone moving into Hainan and then towards Vietnam. That's very long range though, I wouldn't be sure on that yet. That cyclone continues to flail around the Southwest Indian Ocean there at the bottom. This is in the Scilly range, of course, day 10 to 16. And then later on, further north, there's another Bay of Bengal storm that forms out of very little and then moves on towards the coast of India, possibly West Bengal again or Odisha, and then moves in towards the northwest. Another one that has quite a big precursor there, but eventually the low-level circulation ramps up just before its landfall, but that once again is very long range, very low confidence. Not a huge amount happened on this day, but it was May 27th, 1983 when Tropical Storm Adolf made landfall in Mexico. Notably, that year was the latest start in the Northern Hemisphere in recent times. Of course, this year beat that, because we only had the first storm forming on, I think, the 23rd, maybe even the 24th for actual storm status, but cyclone status, which made this year's Northern Hemisphere start the latest since 1878. Wow. Well, back to today then, and we are code yellow, slight downgrade from earlier. Of course, it was code orange yesterday. The first name in the Atlantic this year is Alberto. In the Eastern Pacific it's Aletta, and in the Central Pacific it is still Hone. We're at 19 storms for the year so far, and I imagine Ace will be just a little bit further towards average, but still well below average so far. The next name in the Western Pacific is Maliksi. In the North Indian Ocean now, the next name is Asna. It's about time I got to say new names for those areas. In the Australian region, the next name is Robin. Southwest Indian Ocean, it's Jeremy. And in the South Pacific, it's still Pitta. That's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.